This video was brought to you by Brilliant. The Olympic Games are controlled by the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC. They're a non-profit organization who are, quote, committed to leading the Olympic movement and contributing to building a better world through sport. That might be true, but as we'll learn through their financial statements in a moment, it takes billions of dollars for this non-profit to achieve that aim. So let's unpack the economics of the Olympics and explain why at their core, they're fundamentally kind of broken. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Now, when it comes to their finances, the IOC measures its operations based on 4-year cycles, called Olympiads. That means that each Olympiad includes a winter and a summer games, with each taking place on an alternating 4-year cycle. For instance, we're currently in the 2021 to 2024 period, which contains the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games and the ongoing Paris 2024 Summer Olympic Games. Now, you're just going to have to ignore the fact that because of COVID, the Tokyo Games actually occurred within this period, because technically they were still considered to be the 2020 Games, despite happening in 2021. And that's a whole issue we simply don't have time for. Anyway, as we're still in the current cycle, we don't yet have the IOC's financial statement for Paris or Beijing. So instead, we're going to be focusing on the 2017 to 2020 cycle, which included the Pyeongchang Winter Games and the Tokyo Summer Games. During that period, the IOC had revenues representing a pretty staggering $7.6 billion. Of that revenue, 61% came from broadcast rights, 30% came from marketing rights, 4% came from other revenue, and 5% came from other rights. Now, let's set aside those bafflingly vague other categories and focus on the two main sources of income: broadcast rights and marketing rights. Now, the broadcast rights are relatively self-explanatory. In markets around the world, broadcasters pay the Olympics around $4.6 billion per Olympiad, and in return, they get exclusive access to broadcast the games, with some very limited exceptions. For instance, in Europe, the rights to the games are held by Warner Bros. Discovery, who in turn broadcast the games across the Eurosport network, with them then sub-licensing some broadcast rights to European national partners like the BBC, ZDF, and France TV. The biggest broadcast partner, though, is NBC, who paid $4.38 billion in 2011 for exclusive US broadcast rights for all games between 2012 and 2020, before extending that deal from 2022 to 2032 for an additional $7.75 billion. To be fair though, with the 2021 Tokyo Games pulling in an estimated global audience of 3.05 billion people, it's understandable that broadcasters want a slice of the action, allowing them to sell lucrative advertising spots within the games and promote their other programming throughout the year. When it comes to the other part though, sponsors, the Olympics have a lot of them. The most prestigious though are the members of the top program, or the Olympic Partner Program. Those being AB InBev, Airbnb, Alibaba, Allianz, Atos, Bridgestone, Coca-Cola, Deloitte, Intel, Amiga, Panasonic, P&G, Samsung, Toyota, and Visa. Now, these companies all have, quote, exclusive global marketing rights to the Olympic and Paralympic Games and Olympic teams around the world. In fact, these exclusivity windows can get pretty specific. Now, some are obvious. Coke is the exclusive non-alcoholic beverages partner. Allianz is the exclusive insurance partner. But some are a little more specific, like Bridgestone being the exclusive tires, certain tire and automotive vehicle services, self-propelled bicycles, seismic isolation bearings, and variety of diversified products partner, or Intel, who are the exclusive partner for 5G technology platforms, VR, 3D and 360 content development platforms, artificial intelligence platforms, sports performance platforms, drones, and processors. Anyway, you get the point. These high-tier sponsors pay a ton of money to support the event, and in return, they get to guarantee that they're the only unique accommodations products, unique experiences services, and Olympian experiences services company able to whack the Olympic rings next to their logo. It's not just the money they pay to the IOC, though. According to experts, most of these companies will then spend about 3 times more marketing their connection to the Olympics. Because while Deloitte might feel passionately about the Olympic movement, they're not just doing this for fun. They also want to spend money on advertising to make sure you know that they're paying for the games and supporting athletes. Even if I honestly have no idea what Deloitte actually do. There's also lower tier sponsors though, and specific national sponsors for individual Olympic committees. For instance, Team GB is sponsored by the bed company Dreams, the University of Hull, the German supermarket Audi, the German sports brand Adidas, and yet again, whatever Deloitte does. Regardless, just these 15 top partners together account for a staggering 30% of all of the IOC's revenue, or about $2.3 billion, which is why the Olympics are very litigious when it comes to their brand, regularly starting lawsuits in an attempt to stop non-paying brands from benefiting from the Olympics. Now, despite these huge revenues, the IOC is at pains to make clear on the very first page of their financial document that they only keep 10% of this revenue, spent on developing sports and covering the actual cost of managing all of this, with the other 90% going towards the cost of actually staging the games, athletes, National Olympic Committees, and more. But they're not the only ones spending money on the games though. The host cities also have to put a ton of money towards them too. And actually, this is where the business model is breaking a bit. Hosting the Olympics is unsurprisingly very expensive. Recent host cities have tried to limit costs by building temporary venues and reusing existing structures. But despite their best efforts, Paris is still expected to pay $8.2 billion to host the Olympics, while Tokyo spent $12.9 billion and Rio spent $13.1 billion. Now, as we said earlier, the IOC does contribute to these costs, with them contributing a record $1.9 billion to Tokyo in 2020. But even despite this, there's still a huge gap in the host country's finances. Now, the argument historically has been that the cost of hosting the games is justified by the associated boost in tourism and the soft power benefits of getting to show off your country on the international stage. However, with the Olympics' viewership around the world seemingly dropping off, and with Paris looking pretty empty right now as other non-Olympic tourists dodge the city, that logic is looking increasingly shaky. So while Coke and Deloitte are still keen on promoting their soft drinks and their multinational professional services network alongside the games, cities are decreasingly keen on actually hosting. In fact, our friends over at Search Party recently made a video about exactly that. So what's the solution? Well, with the IOC pulling in about $7.6 billion every 4 years, it's possible that they could contribute more money to each of the host cities. But even still, they just don't have the money needed to provide for all of the winter and summer games costs with less than $8 billion every 4 years. Which leaves us in a difficult spot. One where we could end up with regular host cities repeatedly hosting the games in order to minimize costs and reuse venues. Or we could end up in a world where only autocrats looking to show off their countries are willing to pay for a flashy mega project. Now, be sure to keep an eye on this story as it evolves, as much like every area of our lives, it's sure to progress quickly. In fact, if you're feeling left behind by the news cycle and fast developments in things like AI and tech, then you'll want to check out Brilliant. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. Learning a little every day is one of the most important things you can do, both for personal and professional growth. And Brilliant helps you build real knowledge in minutes a day, with fun lessons that you can do whenever you have time. It's the opposite of mindlessly scrolling and truly helps you learn quickly. One course I found particularly interesting was their course on large language models. We hear a lot about AI and LLMs in the news, but Brilliant helped me to actually get hands-on with real language models, as well as exploring how they build vocabulary, choose their next word, and more. They also helped me grasp the importance of training data by comparing models trained on Taylor Swift lyrics to models trained on a cookbook or big text terms and conditions. If you want to learn more and understand the world around you better, whether that's in order to get a job in AI or just to understand what everyone's talking about, then you can try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/TLDR or by clicking the link in the description. Plus, by doing so, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video.